So I look at the diet of America today, or the diet of Babylon back then. What was the food that King Nebuchadnezzar, they were offering or urging upon Daniel and his friends to nourish them?
Right.
It was meat and drink and alcoholic beverage.
Sure.
Stimulating food, all right? And Daniel said, no, I won't eat it. So let's turn there, shall we?
Let's do it.
Daniel chapter 1. This is one of my favorite books in the Bible. In fact, you know, it's my first name, so, and I'm teaching health. But, you know, I want to bring out a couple points here. You know, we're talking about the scriptures and the Bible coming alive. Well, this is a great story to teach health principles. I think it's one of the best. But in Daniel chapter 1, these Israelites are taken captive by King Nebuchadnezzar and brought to Babylon. And it says in verse 4 that they were children in whom was no blemish, and they were well favored, skillful in wisdom and cunning, in knowledge and understanding science. And it says in verse 5, and the king appointed them a daily provision of the king's meat and of the wine which he drank, and so nourishing them for 3 years, that at the end thereof they might stand before the king. So they got 3 years that they're going to nourish them before they go back before Nebuchadnezzar. But one thing I find interesting in this right off is I believe, as we were talking in 1 Corinthians 10:11, that all these things happen for ensamples.
Okay.
I think this is a great one because it parallels and it fulfills, you know, in Daniel's day, what we're looking for in the end of time, and that is a church in the book of Ephesians, I'll go 5, verse 27, that he might present it to himself a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing. So what do I, and that it would be holy without blemish. So
Right.
here's Daniel, holy without blemish. Here's a church in the last day, holy without blemish. But this story is not just built upon his sanctified life. This sanctified life embraced obedience to the health laws
That's right.
that God had.
And Paul, in other words, Romans 12:1, I beseech you therefore, brethren, what? By the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice. Of course, you have to go back into the sanctuary. They had to have a lamb of no blemish. They couldn't bring their broken-legged lamb or old ones that were ready to die. They had to be a lamb of the first year, and they had to have no blemish. And so Paul's even referring back even to them, listen, you know, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable
unto God,
which is your reasonable service.
And I love that word, reasonable service, because in Strong's Concordance, you know what it translates? Which is your religious worship.
Okay.
So your offering to God that you bring of your own body is a living, not a dead sacrifice, but a living one. And I believe what God is saying, be holy, deny self. Daniel said, I will not take the meat, I will not take the drink. And I want to talk about that a minute.
Let's do it.
Why would Daniel refuse the meat? Was it because of just health reasons?
Well, you know, it's a good question, because the Israelites, back then, the Hebrews, and the Israelites, they were able to eat, there were clean and unclean foods. We can go back into Numbers and look at that. And other places, clean and unclean foods. Well, they were able to eat meat, certain meats, and they were able to have drink, and yet Daniel didn't.
So what possibly was on the table of King Nebuchadnezzar's cuisine that Daniel would say no as a Hebrew?
Well, he had to have good stuff. Yeah. There had to be fruits and vegetables. I mean, there couldn't be only meat and drink, but the thing of it is, I think that obviously we know there had to be foods that he was not going to partake in.
So here's what I see.
Okay.
I see a pig with an apple in its mouth.
Okay.
Now the Bible tells us that we, according to the Hebrew dietary law, they were not to eat the swine, not even to touch it, because it was considered unclean. The other thing is, in the book of Genesis chapter 9, verse 4, it says, the flesh with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof, you shall not eat. Now say there was cow there. Now God doesn't say you can't eat the cow.
Right.
You know, it's cloven-footed and choose the cut. But perhaps there was blood in it. But here's what I find interesting. Daniel doesn't say, bring me kosher meat, get the pig away, bring me a lamb. He says, just give me vegetables.
Yeah.
He refuses all the meat, whether it was good or bad or whatever. The other thing I want to touch briefly, Dwight, if we go to Proverbs, I love this. Go to Proverbs chapter 20. Okay, I'm going to show you a couple things. and read, if you would, Proverbs chapter 20, verse 1.
Okay, it says, wine is a mocker, intoxicating drink arouses brawling, and whoever is led astray by it is not wise.
Now go to Proverbs 23.
Okay.
Let's go there.
Okay.
And read verse 1, 2, and 3.
Okay. It says, when you sit down to eat with a ruler, consider carefully what is before you, and put a knife to your throat if you are a man given to appetite. And then it says, do not desire his delicacies, for they are deceptive food. Do not overwork to be, well, now do you want me to go down to 6
No,
then?
just the 3 right there.
Okay.
It's very important. So here he's talking about when you sit before a ruler, consider what you're eating.
Yes.
Don't take intoxicating drink. And the one that really touched me, and I want you to share this in your version,
Okay.
this is in Proverbs 23, verse 29 through 35.
Okay,
If you will read those.
Yes, I've got, in my Bible, I have all my health stuff in green.
There you go.
So I know it's health. It says, who has woe, who has sorrow, who has contentions, who has complaints. That sounds like the majority of the American people today, doesn't it? Do we all not have woes and sorrows and contentions and complaints? Who has wounds without cause? Who has redness of eyes? Those who linger long at the wine. Those who go in search of mixed wine. Do not look on the wine when it is red, when it sparkles in the cup, when it swirls around smoothly. At the last, it bites like a serpent and stings like a viper. Your eyes will see strange things, and your heart will utter perverse things. Yes, you will be like one who lies down in the midst of the sea, or like one who lies at the top of the mast, saying, they have struck me, but I was not hurt. They have beaten me, but I did not feel it. When shall I awake that I may seek another drink?
Okay.
And I've been there.
That's what I want to share.
I've been there.
Can I share a story?
Do it.
I don't know how many times I got in fights, and I don't remember them. I'd have bleeding knuckles the next morning that you could see where I'd been in a fight. I don't remember being in the fight. In the King James, there's a difference here in verse 33. Your eyes shall behold strange things. Mine says strange women.
Yeah.
How many times was it in the bar looking at strange women, uttering perverse things out of my mouth, drinking mixed wine, getting in fights, and then I like where it says they stricken me, but I felt it not. They beat me, and I felt it not. I think of hangovers. I think of fighting. I think of brawling. There's no good thing for me as far as intoxicating drink.
Yes.
I don't think you should take it in moderation. I don't think one glass is good for your heart. Just drink the pure juice of the grape.
Right.
But Daniel, here's the higher issue. Why wouldn't he take the meat? Why wouldn't he take the drink? He was educated in science. A little bit. He wouldn't allow anything to benumb his mind, to fog his mind. He wanted crystal clear clarity of the mind and said, give me the plants that grow from the earth and give me pure water. And that's what he decided to take. So he was an example, I believe, of the church of the last day.
Amen.
That God's saying, how many more bits of information do we need on colon cancer and red meat and the covers of the magazines warning you about animal foods that are very dangerous to your health? This is one that I wanted to show you that I didn't get to show you last time, but this is a scan in National Geographic that's actually showing a scan of a typical American body here. Where is it?
You showed it to me.
Here.
It was something.
The trouble with fat. This is a scan of the typical American body today. Now, 2/3 of Americans are overweight, 1/3 are clinically obese. You have how many with diabetes? By the time I just mentioned these words, there's a new diabetic diagnosis in the United States. But let me share one thing if I can. When you're obese, it says liver disease. Many obese people develop deposits of fat inside the liver, a condition that can progress to cirrhosis in about 10% of the cases and occasional liver failure. Colon cancer. Obese people are at a greater risk of colon cancer. Abdominal fat appears to increase risk more than fat elsewhere, which may explain why men who tend to store fat in their abdomen have a higher risk. Osteoarthritis. It says being overweight places additional strain on the spine, the hips, the knee joints, causing the loss of cartilage. As the cartilage deteriorates, joint space narrows and bones grind together. Stroke. The risk of having stroke is 2 to 4 times higher in people with type 2 diabetes, 90% of whom are overweight.
Wow.
Type 2 diabetes, people with excess body fat, especially in the abdomen area, often become resistant to insulin